And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
Ben Shapiro is one of the most controversial voices out there, and he's not afraid to take on woke culture head on. He challenges their ideas with facts and logic, cutting through the noise. Just look at the first clip and see it for yourself.
Why do you believe you're right about trans people given the American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Psychoanalytic Association? I can go on for about 5 more associations. And all of these associations have multiple thousands of doctors, sociologists, psychologists, and with PhDs in their respective fields backing the idea that sex and gender are different, effectively gaining the medical consensus for sex and gender being 2 different concepts, yet you have a different opinion.
Okay, so sex and gender are 2 different concepts, but gender is tied to biology. So one of the big problems that you see in sort of the argument in favor of trans rights is this notion that gender and sex are completely separable. They're not completely separable. If they are completely separable, then this means that identifying people by their subjective gender really has no relevance as to whether they are a male or a female. Male and female are biological terms. So using terminology like male and female to describe a self-perception of maleness or femaleness is sort of a bizarre way of arguing whether a thing is a man or a woman. So here's my question. It's an argument that my friend Matt Walsh likes to make. What is a woman? Define what a woman is without reference to the word woman, please.
So this is actually a logical fallacy called a red herring. You're asking me a question in order to actually challenge my question without actually
No, it isn't. I'm saying that
it
really is not. I'm saying that biology, I'm agreeing with you that the notion of gender, which is effeminateness or masculinity, can be different from biology in the sense that biology is just pure male or pure female. But to suggest that there is such a thing as an effeminate male is not to suggest that an effeminate male is now a woman. Transgenderism makes the argument that if you believe that you are a woman, you are therefore a woman. Or if you believe that you are a man, you are therefore a man. I disagree with this. There are objective measures as to whether you're a man or a woman. There are objective measures as to whether you're male or female. There's certainly a spectrum when with regard to effeminateness versus masculinity. That's certainly true, but that does not change the underlying sexual dichotomy that is the basis for all human reproduction. And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Are we to suggest that gender and sex are different in walruses? How does this work exactly? Like, are they different in bears? Anytime you have all mammalian reproduction is rooted in the idea that there's a sexual dichotomy between male and female. To obscure that with all sorts of semantic word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political agenda.
If you can't even define what a woman is without using circular logic, your argument is worthless. Feelings don't rewrite biology. Mammals have been male or female since the beginning of time. It's how reproduction works. The woke crowd wants us to believe that a walrus or a bear can suddenly decide its gender. Absolute lunacy. This isn't about inclusion. It's about forcing everyone to ignore reality for the sake of feelings. You're free to live your life however you want, but don't shove this anti-science garbage down everyone's throat and expect them to cheer.
We only sequenced the human genome fully in 2004. How sure are you that these individuals aren't realizing their identities through genetics and not sociology? Research has shown in a large group of homosexuals, 25% of them shared similar genetic markers. Would you say there is a case to be made between social taboos like homosexuality and transgenderism and genetics? And if there were a study that showed a correlation, would you change your views on those topics?
Well, I mean, if there is a study that so I would assume that there is no such study that shows that men are women or that men can become women. Okay, if there's a study showing a genetic correlation with gender dysphoria, I would assume that there's a basis for that. Virtually all human behavior, literally almost all of it, is a combination of genetics and environment. And that is like the broadest possible statement that you can make about human behavior and genetics. And when you talk about, for example, the human genome study, well, what it said about, for example, the possibility of a gay gene is there is no gay gene. What it suggests is there are risk-seeking genes that have heavy correlation with, for example, more alternative sexual tendencies. Okay, but there's no such thing as a quote-unquote gay gene that is 100% dispositive where you find it and now you know this person is going to be gay, right? I mean, that is according to the human genome study that you're talking about here. So if I were to find a study that were to suggest that gender dysphoria exists in a certain percentage of the population because of genetics, would that shock me? No. I mean, I would assume that that is the case, like right now, without a study. What would shock me is if I found that men were women. That would be kind of a surprise. And I assume that there's no genetic study that could make that case.
What if there were genetics that made somebody more likely to be gay without the social structures around them? If we could find genetic markers that made an individual more likely to be gay.
Well, I mean, again, I think we're kind of talking across purposes here. I'm acknowledging that there are probably genetic influences that make people more likely to behave in certain ways on sex and on everything else. I'm also suggesting that the identification change from 0.8% of the population LGBT for people born before 1946 to 21% of the population for people born between 1997 and 2003 is not the result of a massive genetic bottleneck that occurred in 50 years in Western civilization, that it's a result of societal trends. And there is a trendiness to certain behavior. There's a trendiness to identifying in a certain way. It's happened before, it'll happen again, I'm sure. Social contagions are a thing. Do I think that it is just that society for thousands of years has been so repressive that fully 1/5 of the population was LGBT? And until this very moment, we just didn't know it, genetically speaking, and I have serious doubts that that is the case.
The idea that centuries of human understanding about sex and gender were suddenly wrong because of a cultural shift is absurd. Sure, some behaviors might have genetic influences, but let's not confuse that with rewriting the reality of male and female or claiming that society has been repressing 1/5 of the population for all of history. That's fantasy, not science. What we're seeing is the woke world trying to normalize feelings over facts, pushing this idea that identity trumps biology. It's a dangerous game that undermines actual science. The fact remains, men are men, women are women, and no amount of trend-chasing rhetoric will change that.
How do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, someone's excited, okay.
Sex is biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So,
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society. It's
okay, no, it is not in the mind, okay? You're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological issues at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are. Let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are, okay? Because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably gonna be naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Is it?
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
It's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender. You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You can still legally change it. People recognize
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Obviously, you can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do lots of things in the past that were incorrect biologically and correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand how you're accepting these children that are.
It's not a matter of open-minded and accepting. I want them to get treatment that they see fit, but that's not involving me. The idea behind the transgender movement as a civil rights movement is the idea that all of their problems would just go away if I would pretend that they were the sex to which they claim membership. That's nonsense.
Woke culture demands that society collectively lie to protect feelings, all while undermining science and common sense. Changing your legal documents or shouting down those who disagree doesn't alter the biological reality that men are men, women are women, and no one can just identify their way into a new age or sex. The push for universal acceptance of these fantasies doesn't solve problems, it creates them. Forcing everyone to conform to subjective identities doesn't help those struggling with their own issues. It merely erodes the foundation of truth. Let's stop pretending this is progress and call it what it is, a dangerous rejection of reality.
Hello, my name is Quentin Merritt. I'm a mathematician and a physicist here, a double major, and I also just won the most prestigious award in the country to pursue research at any institution I want, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. So I think I'm pretty, qualified to say that most of what you're saying is based on old data. But my question to you, and so I want you all to realize that
last month, but sure.
For example, gender identity disorder, that's the DSM-4, bro. We use the DSM-5 now for psychologists to be able to talk about...
I literally cited the DSM-5 in the speech, and it's called gender dysphoria, which is the term that I use throughout the speech, not gender identity disorder.
You sound like a bozo, bro. And you get no and you can't even make your wife wet, bro, so what's good?
So, let me just say, the nice thing about having several small children, I don't feel the necessity to have my masculinity
challenged. If we're using a
by
Western colonial idea of gender, then why should it apply? If we're using, because the gender binary is a Western colonialist framework of gender.
You're right. Men and women don't exist in any other culture.
No. Think
right.
about Native American.
Nailed it.
Third gender people. I'm not saying that. Third gender people exist in Native American societies, Western African societies, like Southern Native American societies, like Mexico. So in other places that are not white dominated,
and they
like
are
the United States or
incorrect.
Europe, and so you're
I'm
saying white, so non-white
incorrect.
people. I'm a mathematician and a physicist. You cannot tell me.
So I have a question.
And also, you're not a biologist.
So I have a question.
I'm 20.
As a mathematician and a physicist, what in the hell do you know about human biology?
And you got your law degree from Harvard. What do you know about biology? You got your law degree from Harvard.
And frankly, I would ask another question. If your logic is so flawed as a mathematician and a physicist, I would suggest that whichever institution gave you an award, revoke it immediately.
The woke claim to champion open-mindedness and intellectual discourse, yet when confronted with facts or logic, they resort to ad hominem attacks. Shapiro mentions the DSM-5, ignore it and accuse him of clinging to outdated concepts. Try to pass off Western colonialism as an argument against biological reality? Sure, why not? The goal isn't truth, it's shutting down dissent. This kind of nonsense exposes the rot at the core of woke ideology, a fear of scrutiny. They can't win on the battlefield of ideas, so they'll sabotage the debate itself. If you dare to challenge their sacred dogmas, you're labeled ignorant, bigoted, or colonial.